Yeah,
and not everybody has that, right? And that a lot has to do with what would you attest that to? Or do you do a lot of I mean, obviously you meditate, right?
sure.
Every day.
In
I mean,
that personal development space, in those the men's only programs, which aren't just men's only, and I'm not actually affiliated with the men's only programs anymore, just because I kept wanting to evolve some learning. And in those spaces, I mean, I studied, well, currently now I've studied meditation on 3 different continents. We're 8 years in, I would say a good 20 or 30 styles.
wow.
Um, it just huge sums. But then on top of that, I just kept going into more psychology and more
Mm,
psychology. And I would pick up people like Byron Katie, who she has a book out there called The Work. And we used to teach this in the men's courses. And I studied the work itself for about 3 years because it gave me a framework of breaking down thought processes
hmm.
and either finding the life lesson or really, Byron calls it the turnaround. It's being able to take a judgment, find out if the judgment's actually true or if it's just some emotion that you got going on in your head.
Right.
And then you ask yourself the question again in 3 different perspectives. I'm looking for something at the moment that I could try to use as an experiment.
Yeah.
So if I were to just hold this up, and I know you can't see it very well, and anybody else that can't either,
It's a
and I
facial
could
bar.
say,
We could see it.
yeah, yeah. Oh, there you go, facial bar. Well, let me turn it around. If I were just to ask, what is this? um, without giving you the context, without being able to show you the dimensions or the front label, this could be a battery, it could be whatever. And this is what happens to us as humans. We see our problem through our lens, our perspective. And Byron gave me the tools to look at it from an outside perspective and the opposite perspective so that I could actually find the real truth about what this is. And this is one of those tools, and I've written about them in both books, and they're both accredited to Byron, as we kind of simplified and just squeezed it and condensed it. If somebody has a problem, a judgment about somebody else or about their life, and they've ran it in their head more than 10 times, most people will run problems for days, if not months.
Sure.
Depressions for years can be caused off of these things.
Yeah.
It's really because it's an undiagnosed, it's an unlooked at um, issue or problem. And once you start writing things down, or once you start opening up to different perspectives, you kind of get to release what those judgments are, what those looks, those pieces are. So the question about how did we get into this open space, and how is it, knowing that it's not the norm, I hope one day it is. Um,
Yeah.
After the Selfish Divorce came out, I started running support groups for divorcees. And at one time, one of our groups on Facebook was 800 people.
Wow.
There was a couple of marriages that came out of that, which is kind of weird. I'm running support groups for marriages. I'm like, guys, I don't want you to date, but they did. Uh, and I had a lot of people tell me, like, my spouse would never do that. And what we know about personal development work, the work, is it doesn't matter what anybody else will do. It only matters what you're willing to do.
Right.
And if you're willing to do it, the best situation will come out of it, no matter what. But if you want to stay in the divorce cycle where I won't try something new because they'll never do it, nothing will ever happen, and you'll just stay in that circle. So somebody has to break. And I just happen to be lucky enough to have a former spouse where she was willing to do something else. He is now a landmark forum leader. So he's a seminar speaker for a personal development company. And we just kind of were like, okay, how does this dial in, and can we try it? And so you're right, it took all 3 of us. But I believe that once something's done, and we can go back to the mirror neuron, somebody's able to show the way. It's
Yeah.
available for anybody.
Yeah. I love that. I hope that you can share that more. And that's probably a lot in your book, right? And you talk about
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to reading that for sure.
Cool.
Um, I'm going to take it. I'm going to shift this completely, this
Yeah.
conversation. Okay.
Cool.
We talked, or you wrote me something about There's two things I want to talk about. Number one is, and I'll ask you, you mentioned the next group of billionaires. And
Yes.
what do you mean by that? Is that your opinion? Is that your research? I mean, what's going on here?
I think it's a term that's floating around. About 4 years ago, I'm watching a version or video from Jason Silva, and he touched on it. And then I'm like, okay, cool. What does this actually mean? So I'm closing a company. I'm looking for something new to do, and I'm looking for widgets to sell, right? And a widget is anything. I'm looking to open the next Instagram platform, that we've had, and I'm looking to do something else. And then I started thinking, what if I wasn't worried about selling something? What if I was just starting to concentrate on helping people?
Hmm.
And over that, this is where our current now One Mind Meditation, which is our live streaming group only meditation. It just means that things are only live. There's no recordings, and it's meant to connect groups of people together. And so I started looking, how do I impact more people? If I can reach and impact 1 billion people, I am the billionaire, whether or not that's in monetary perspectives or not, which I believe it is. That if you or somebody that has the ability to create and help, you know, not focused on the dollar,
Yeah.
it was wild. I had created several companies. We've done really well, and I always knew how much money we would make before I
Yeah.
started, right? In internet marketing or whatever, you just
Yeah. We
know.
both have the internet marketing background. We know exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going into this space is going into complete faith that it'll just work out, that you'll build something that will help, and then other opportunities or whatever will open up. And so I do believe that the people that are focused on solving large problems or providing a service that brings more joy or happiness to large groups of people, those are the next billionaires, or those are the current billionaires
Ah,
now.
I like that. So to go along with that, I was about so I went to Tony Robbins event.
Mhm. Unleash the
Uh,
power within.
it was that's a 3 day event. I went to the 7 day
Date with
Date
Destinies.
with Destiny.
Cool.
And have you been to that?
Not with Date to Destiny,
Okay.
no. Or Date with
It
Destiny.
was, and people, anybody in my circle will tell me I came back like high as hell. Like, oh my God, you'll never, obviously you get the high, then you come down, you figure out your space, right?
Yeah.
It was absolutely life changing. Like, I went with John Sager actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so transformational, so incredible. I never cried my entire life. And the last day there, I'm on the phone with my wife. Jesus, I'm tearing up right now thinking about it. And and I just lost it. Like,
Mm.
I like lost it. Just talking to her, apologizing to anything I've ever done, whatever. It was just absolutely transformational, and that broke me, right, in a good way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then I started reading books. One of the books I read was Morning Miracle, and that's how I started my meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3-4 months into meditation, I'm driving, and this like rush came over me. You know how you get these waves of like just absolute gratitude,
Yeah.
absolute gratefulness, love. It's just, and it happens more and more as you expand your mind and you work on your mind, right? And I got one, and it was huge, and it was literally this calling. And I know this sounds cheesy, but it was this calling. It was like, you need to do something where you can talk about your experience, share with other people, and just impact as many people as you can through your story, through what you're learning, and now your newfound interests. And you need to figure out how to do that. It was really weird. And I
Mm.
called my wife and told her this, or I told her at dinner that night. I can't remember. It was one of them, and she's like, "I don't think that's cheesy. I think that's beautiful. I think that's amazing, and you
Yeah.
should." And that's when I started dabbling with a podcast and creating more of a personal brand, and changing my messages on Instagram from like, "Hey, look at me partying at the club. Look at me on this internet marketing event doing this cool thing,"
Yeah.
to just like sharing what I was learning and what I was going through, and sharing, insights. So when you said that, the next billionaire, that I could totally relate and resonate with that. And that makes
Mm.
total sense to me. I love it. I just get excited for talking to people like you, learning more, like, I've never wanted to learn like I have over the past six,
Yeah.
9 months. Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's because I want to share that with others
Yeah.
and, have that impact.
If it helps you, what I did, I devoured personal development books for probably 3 years,
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And then I started thinking, well, what's outside the space? Where is Dr. Wayne Dyer learning his stuff from, right?
Mm.
He's writing a book that's, I don't want to call it regurgitated information, but he's learning his information somewhere and then he's compacting it through his
Yeah.
lens. So I
I
stopped
remember that.
reading personal development books.
Okay.
I do on occasion. And I started going to like, okay, great. Where can I expand my creativity? So that led me to Shakespeare. So I started reading poetry. Then I'm like, okay, great. I want to know how the universe works. So who should I study from? I started reading Stephen Hawking's books,
Mm.
which is,
I,
it was like getting hit in the head with a brick in the beginning.
can you even understand him in the beginning? Is it like so
It's tough.
complex or what?
Well, his mind just thinks differently than, a mind that was like, oh, I can just learn things. And it's interesting in the spiritual communities, there are so many amazing people that have really tapped in abilities, like communicating with angels and just they're downloading data like all the time without framework of the 3D world. And so that's where I started going to psychology and reading things that weren't in print or that weren't written at least 100 years ago. So if I'm reading a personal development book, it's from the 1700s. Because
Ah.
there was a time in history where science, religion, psychology, business, they were all one philosophy. And then there are some really nasty things that happened to the planet, and there's some nasty things that humans did. And we started separating. Well, if science doesn't meet theology, or at least the new theology that we created, then they're separate. But once you start going back old enough and you can start re-putting these pieces together, what's happening to us now starts to make a lot of sense.
Mm.
So we just started reading different things.
Do you have a recommendation of a couple?
So Stephen Hawking's Brief History in Time, that was
Okay.
his first one. That book, was to prove the Big Bang Theory. And then the second book of Stephen Hawking's, which is it's something about everything.
If you can't remember, I'll look it up.
It's like a story of everything. It's his last book. And
Okay.
it was the proof to prove that the Big Bang Theory wasn't true. So
Really?
his first 30 years was to prove that it was true. His next 30 years or 40 years was to prove that it wasn't true. What they decided in physics and in what they decided in science in general is there's no one theory that works for everything. There's a ton of theories that work, and you can put them together like baking a cake, which
Yeah.
give you an answer, but not one thing that works for anything.
So
And
he was just saying you can prove that it did and you can prove that it didn't. I mean, is that
correct.
his whole? Yeah.
You can prove based on these 10 theories. If you stack them,
Yeah.
then the answer say yes. If you stack these 10 theories, then it says no, that there
Right.
has to be some other kind of intelligence that was helping manifest all of this.
Right. I just watched on Netflix. There was a documentary. Will Smith voiced it over. It was like,
Oh, cool.
it was about how the earth started, and it was like little molecules that all joined up together, and then how the whole world works. It was really interesting. I can't remember the title of it, but there was like 10 episodes. It was
Cool.
good. It gave you,
Yeah.
it showed you how the world is like, is it's its own entity. They was talking about from astronauts in space. They were talking about it. It was really, and it was really cool.
Humans look like a super organism, which look like a bacteria. If you back out far enough into space, we act like bacteria on the planet.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's one of my favorite topics. Like I've talked to doctors now that teach in school that still teach the Darwin theory of evolution,
Yeah.
even though that it's been disproven, and they won't not teach it because of their tenure. They're like, the next evolution of professors will teach that one cell could become two, but where did the first cell come from? And our brain goes, oh, it's only a single cell organism, but we don't understand that there's like 35 parts that have to happen in order for a single cell organism to work. It
Sure.
has to eat, it has to metabolize food, it has to have waste. They're like, if you look at a single cell microbe, they're like intense. So anyway, it's awesome.
There's a whole other podcast that you could go in
Yep,
on that, right?
totally. I know we've kind of shot the gamut on a lot of things so
I
far.
know. Well, I didn't realize this wealth of information experiences that you had. It's really cool. We'll have to definitely even talk more on this stuff. I want to,
Yes.
we've been talking for a while now. One of the things I do want to ask before we finish up here is the question I had down is that you mentioned is because this podcast is based around mindfulness and meditation a lot, mainly is why I started it. So you said, how can meditation lower crime rates? I was
Yeah,
interested when you mentioned that. You want to just touch on that?
sure. You know, when we were talking about the billionaire question,
Yeah.
this is the question: how do we impact a billion people? Came to this solution.
Okay.
Just doing research and started studying different forms of meditation, and I ran into something called the Maharishi effect. And
Yes.
right, Maharishi created transcendental meditations.
Let me stop you. I Googled it before you.
Mhm.
I couldn't find anything on it.
Really?
Well, I might have
Yeah.
spelled it wrong. That could be
It could
possibly
be, look
why.
up transcendental meditations and then
Okay,
copy
that's
Maharishi
that.
from that.
Okay, okay, okay. Cool, cool.
So the transcendental meditators
Yeah,
started this. Well, I'm not sure where Maharishi got his ideas. He came from India. He
yeah.
was here. Um, Favorite culture to study on meditation is Indian. They have everything about the body map like craziness. So if you're
Mm,
interested in that, then
okay.
look at something Indian. But um, I ran into this research study that was in 1975 in the middle of Washington, D.C. They
Uh-huh.
brought 6,000 meditators together every day for an hour for 30 days. And all they did was meditate together, love and light and feeling great. And at the end of this, they went back to the city, and cities look at the health of a community by 100 different KPIs, key profit indicators. Well,
Okay.
I don't know that they call them profit indicators, but that's what came to mind. But they look at, okay, what was with violent crime? How many arrests were there? How many violent or disturbances? And then they say, and they look at it in general, the health of this community. And then they say, okay, great. What percentage above chance? In any type of science, they say, what percentage, like the placebo effect, right? 50% of taking a pill works and 50% it works without it.
Some are taking the real pill, some aren't. Correct. Right.
Right. So they say, what percentage above chance, like going to Vegas, rolling the dice, what percentage do you have that you're going to roll the dice? And they look at, was it a holiday weekend? Was there big storms? Anything that would mean that people weren't doing what they would normally do. And they rated it 10,000 times above chance, meaning it had a 10,001 chance that it wasn't the meditators meditating that
Yeah.
lowered crime rate in Washington, D.C. during those 30 days. They stopped, crime rate goes back up. So from that point, they've had 45 that we could find different university quality research studies all around the world. The one that happened in Iraq was 75% in terrorist attacks during the time that they were doing it in the city that they were doing it in. The easy thing to look at is with the amount of thought processes we have around violence, the news, movies, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
we're constantly pumping out thought processes that come out of our body, out of our being, and interact with everybody around violence and about where things are at. What they're doing is saying, how many people does it take to counteract that balance? And it's 1% of a population. It's just the nail down, nail down, nail down. 1% of a population, if they come together in this oneness,
Yeah.
right? In this, I care about love and I care that you care about love. I care that your family is good and healthy. It's these kinds of meditations and thought processes
Right.
that if it happens enough, that will counterbalance the other stuff that's happening, which brings this out. So when with one mind, the purpose of making a live streaming application where anybody can meditate, anybody can create a meditation, anybody can create a prayer, and they can let anybody around the world join, which is because we want to hit that 1%.
Ah, that's beautiful. That's a great concept. I like that.
Yeah.
And this is on the, and I want to say it's on the App Store that you can get this, right? On both on Android and
Android
Apple.
and Apple, it's a free app.
And it's
Nobody
One
has to pay
Mind.
anything.
Okay.
One Mind Meditation is the name of the application.
Okay.
You can just go to joinonemind.com and it will automatically find the right store and download it for you.
1%.
Yeah. So it's
Cool.
an undertaking, but people are doing it anyway. What we're trying to do is in the body, a diseased cell is something that's not acting in accordance with everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of people doing a lot of good, but we're not necessarily coming and bringing that goodness together, even for a few minutes. It's
Ah,
like
okay. That's
dots,
interesting.
ting, 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 ting. So we're just saying, hey, invest into our world by spending a couple minutes by just breathing or any form of meditation you can want. It could be guided or qigong or silent or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We just want it to be intentional, that everybody is there at the same time, wherever they're at in the world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm glad you're doing that. It's people like you that when you do these things that no one else is doing, or even just only a couple other people, it could change the world,
Yeah.
man. It could do that totally. And I love that big thinking.
And I hope other people copy our business model and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I did. Yeah. I think I saw Headspace started live a couple months ago, but I know yours was out before that, which is pretty cool to think, you know what I mean?
It all just depends. There's a lot of really cool things that are happening, but I hope
Yeah.
more do it because
Yeah.
what we care about is a result, not the fact that we are the ones doing it.
Right. That's awesome. That's a great mindset to have.
You're
actually,
great.
you know how I usually start my podcast is, and maybe I can throw this in the beginning. I'll ask you, is there any guilty pleasure that you have that people might not know about you?
Guilty pleasure that
Yeah.
No, my guilty pleasure is chocolate, which is interesting. This is another podcast too. I went 90 days without eating food. I just did juice cleanses so that I could find out what foods I was addicted to and what emotions they were triggering. And it was chocolate. One of them was chocolate.
Wow.
Yeah.
So another thing that you did that I'm like, what?
I'm gonna end it right there.
Nomad Greg doing all these things that I don't even know about. That's
yeah.
funny. Oh
It's
man,
pretty
cool.
wild, man. Juice
Cool.
cleanse for 90 days. You get to learn what you're addicted to.
Yeah. Oh, I know sweets. I'm addicted. I already can tell you. I am craving sweets all the time, which is why I have to like always go to the gym and make sure I work that off. But
yeah. Well, the answer is for me, I crave chocolate twice. Once if I'm sad and once if I'm craving it. But now I know to ask the question, am I sad or do I want chocolate?
Yeah, interesting. So you attach it to emotions too, your food.
Oh, everything around food is attached to your emotions and triggers.
Yeah.
When I get really overwhelmed, I want like a big, huge fat burrito. And I learned that was because of like a huge one, like something that's just comfort food, because I would get enough of food in my stomach that it would take all the blood from my head into my stomach and it would automatically calm me down.
Yeah.
It was like an antidepressant, which is in food.
I was going to say, is just like an antidepressant. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get to learn those things.
Wow. How about that? Yeah. Now you're making me think. Now when I'm craving something, I'm gonna be like, oh, is this because I'm stressed? Is this because I'm horny? I mean, why do I want this food?
It can be, man. All of us are like these combination locks, and when you can figure out your own combination, everything becomes easy.
Yeah, that's great. All right, dude.
Cool, man.
Brother, Greg, I really appreciate it, man. That was awesome.